In the soft golden haze of early morning, the old bell at St. Jude's Chapel tolled once, twice, then fell silent. A sleepy wind rolled through the town of Hollow Bluff, kicking up dust in lazy spirals along the empty street. Most folk were still in their beds, chasing dreams or dodging the worries that waited for them at sunrise. But someone had been awake earlier than the rest. A whimper broke the stillness. Outside the chapel doors, bundled in a woven blanket rougher than burlap, and swaddled with more hope than warmth, lay a baby girl no more than a few weeks old. Her skin was pale as porcelain, her cries soft and uncertain, like she hadn't quite decided if the world was worth the effort. Tied to the blanket with a frayed ribbon was a note, its edges fluttering with the morning breeze. Her name is Briar. She is loved. Please keep her safe. The note bore no name. No signature. No clue who had placed her there or why. Sheriff Mayfield was the first to find her. The wiry man crouched beside the child, removing his hat with trembling hands. His voice, gruff with years of tobacco and law-keeping, softened to a whisper. Merciful. Heavens. He wasn't alone for long. By the time Pastor Henry opened the chapel doors, drawn by the bell's toll and the hush of something amiss, a few townsfolk had gathered. No one knew what to do, only that something holy and sorrowful had just fallen into their care. We need the doctor, one woman said. We need a preacher, said another. But it was an old rancher, standing a few paces off, who stepped forward, slow and deliberate. The man had the kind of presence that made others pause. He was broad-shouldered and sunburnt, dressed and worn. Denim and a canvas duster, boots caked in prairie mud. The brim of his hat shadowed his face, but his voice was clear when he spoke. No, she needs a home. Sheriff Mayfield turned to him. Elias? Elias Carver nodded once, then knelt down and lifted the baby with the kind of care men reserve for broken bones or rare miracles. Briar stared up at him with eyes the color of a storm sky. He read the note again, more to himself than anyone else. Then he whispered words only she could hear. You're mine now. Elias Ranch sat 5 miles west of Hollow Bluff, tucked between two hills like a secret trying to stay hidden. The house was more cabin than home, built sturdy and meant for one. His barn leaned like a drunk uncle, and his corral fencing had more patchwork than plan. But it was his, all of it. And now it was hers too. He laid Briar on the kitchen tables. Quilted cloth, her tiny fists punching at the air. She looked too small to belong to anything so vast as a ranch. Yet she fit. The first weeks were a whirlwind of guesswork and sleepless nights. Elias, who hadn't had to care for anyone since burying his brother years ago, found himself reading baby books borrowed from the schoolhouse and boiling water at all hours like it was a ritual. The nights were hardest. She'd cry and scream until her lungs gave out, and he'd pace the wooden floor, bouncing her against his chest, whispering nonsense until they both fell asleep sitting up. By the time Briar was 3 months old, she had more names than she knew what to do with. Little Bean, Storm Eyes, Peanut. She responded to all of them with gurgles and wide-mouthed smiles. And by then, the town had started to whisper about the girl with no past, and the man with too much of one. They said Elias had no business raising a baby. Said the girl should be given to someone proper. Maybe the pastor's wife, or the schoolmistress, or anyone who wore Sunday clothes more than once a week. But no one said it to his face. Not yet. One day, 3 men rode up to Elias' land, county men. Elias saw them from the field, their horses, kicking up dust like they didn't mind stirring up trouble. Briar, now nearly walking, tottered in the corral with the help of a wooden crate. She wore Elias' old bandana tied around her waist like a belt. Her laugh made the cattle look up. Elias met the men at the gate. The tallest one, wearing a badge half swallowed by his vest, tipped his hat but didn't smile. Mr. Carver, we're here about the girl. She's got a name. Yes, sir, Briar. Thing is, there's been a petition. Some folks in town don't think this is a proper place for a child. Elias didn't blink. You tellin' me Dustin cows are worse than an orphanage? It's not personal, it always is. The man cleared his throat. There's a hearing next week. Judge Hollingsworth is riding in. You'll need to prove you're fit. Elias looked over his shoulder at Briar, who had now fallen and was attempting to eat dirt. She's alive, ain't she? That ain't always enough. They left a paper with the date and time. Elias folded it in two, tucked it into his coat pocket, and went to pick up his girl. The hearing was held in the chapel, the same place she had been left. The pews were full. Folks who never spoke to Elias showed up just to watch. He stood before the judge, Briar on his hip. She was clean, her hair combed, her little boots polished. Mr. Carver, the judge began, you have no formal education beyond the 3rd grade, no spouse, no family nearby, no previous experience raising children, and no affiliation with any religious institution. Is that correct? Elias nodded. Yes, ma'am. And yet you believe you're the best person to raise this child. He looked down at Briar, then back at the judge. I know what it's like to be left behind. I know what it means to be picked up by someone who doesn't have to care, but does anyway. And I know love don't come from paperwork. It comes from staying when you could leave. There was silence. Briar reached up and touched his beard, then grinned. The judge blinked, then turned to the crowd. Anyone else care to make a claim for the child? No one spoke. Then the court sees no reason to remove Miss Briar from Mr. Carver's custody. Case closed. Outside, as folks filtered out, someone clapped Elias on the shoulder. Sheriff Mayfield, you're a stubborn bastard, he said. That's how she learn. She already has. As Elias strapped Briar into the saddle with him, she giggled. Where to now? Someone called. Elias looked west where the land stretched out. Into tomorrow, home. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow, I have a special story for you. The sun painted long golden lines across the sky as Elias Carver rode home, his daughter nestled against him in the saddle. Hollow Bluff shrank behind them like a half-forgotten memory, and the rustling prairie grass swayed gently, as if whispering secrets to those who knew how to listen. Briar, half asleep against his chest, stirred when they passed the cottonwood tree that marked the edge of the ranch. Elias had carved a heart into its trunk years ago. A name had once been inside that heart, but it had worn away, like most things in his life that didn't last. Now it belonged to no one, and somehow that made it hers. Almost home, little bean, he whispered. She murmured something incoherent. A baby word made of breath and dreams. The next week passed without ceremony. Elias worked the land like he always had, fixing the irrigation pipe that burst during last week's freeze, stacking hay for the mules, brushing down the cattle until their hides gleamed under the early spring sun. Only now, everything he did had an echo. Briar followed him. She couldn't speak much, but she had a way of making her wants known. A tug on his pant leg meant she wanted up. A furrowed brow and outstretched hand meant she was hungry. And the squealing giggle she gave whenever she spotted a chicken was enough to make Elias believe that, maybe, God had given him this child just to remind him what joy sounded like. Neighbors started stopping by more often. Mrs. Kingsley brought a jar of fig jam and a quilt made from scraps of old dresses. She said it wasn't much, but Elias saw her fingers tremble when she handed it over. The pastor's wife came next. She offered Elias a box of books for young children. When he opened the top, Briar reached in and immediately pulled out a volume with a dog on the cover. That one, she said, her first clear word since the hearing. Elias blinked. She said a word, the pastor's wife beamed. First of many. But peace never comes without a shadow. It started with a letter. Sealed in blue wax and stamped with a courthouse crest. It arrived in the post one morning. folded so sharply it could have cut skin. He read it twice before setting it down. Someone had appealed the ruling. The petitioner was unnamed. A clause in the law allowed for anonymous concern. But whoever had written it wanted Briar removed. Said Elias was dangerous. Said he had a violent past, that a man with blood on his hands had no business raising a child. The words rattled inside Elias like loose bullets. He folded the letter and placed it in the wooden box under his bed, alongside a rusted six-shooter and a photograph of a younger version of himself. One arm slung around a man who looked just like him, but with brighter eyes. His brother, Jesse, dead 5 years now. Elias hadn't touched the gun since the funeral. But some nights he dreamed of it. Dreamed of pulling it out again. Not for revenge, but for remembrance. For the man he used to be, the one who fought every threat with grit and fire. But that man had died with Jesse, hadn't he? The knock came late one night, just as Elias was settling Briar in her crib. A soft rhythm, not threatening, but firm. He answered with a shotgun in his hand, just in case. "Put that down," said the sheriff, stepping into the lantern light. "Ain't here to shoot nobody." Elias lowered the weapon, but didn't offer a seat. "I came to tell you what I couldn't write in that letter. The appeal's not just legal, it's political. Judge Hollingsworth is being pressured. Mayor Pritchard wants her seat in the next district election. She's pushing this case as a way to look tough on domestic instability." Elias stared at him. "You telling me my life is a campaign slogan now?" Mayfield sighed. "I'm telling you someone's coming. A woman from Child and Family Services. City. Type. She'll want to talk to you. See the home. Interview Briar. Briar can't even string 2 words together. Don't matter. She'll come anyway. And she'll bring her own ideas of what fit to raise looks like." Elias nodded. "Thanks for the warning." Mayfield hesitated before leaving. "I don't know what kind of man you were before, Elias, but I see the kind of father you are now. And if they try to take her, well, you won't be standing alone." The inspector arrived 3 days later. Her name was Marianne LeClaire, and she stepped down from her rental car in heels that immediately sunk into the muddy path leading to Elias' front porch. Thought she looked up at the Crook house. The bent wind vane, the clothesline stretched between 2 fence posts. Then she looked at Elias. He stood at the top of the porch stairs, arms crossed. Briar peeked around his leg, her eyes cautious. Marianne smiled tightly. "Mr. Carver, I presume." "Ma'am, I'm here for the assessment." "So I heard." She glanced down at her heels, now mud-stained, then back at the child. "And this must be Briar." Briar didn't speak. She merely tucked herself further behind Elias. Marianne noted it, then opened her binder. "I'll need to inspect the home, observe the child's interactions, and conduct an interview. Are you amenable?" Elias didn't move. "Long as you know you're walking into my house, not a courtroom." "Understood." The visit lasted nearly 3 hours. Marianne poked at everything. The pantry, mostly canned beans, bread, flour, and jerky. The crib, hand-carved, slightly uneven. The bathroom, clean but cramped. And the yard, a scatter of chicken feathers. And one curious goat named Daisy. She noted Briar's clothes, a bit mismatched but clean. She watched Elias read her a book by the fireplace, even though he stumbled over some of the longer words. When it was over, Marianne closed her binder. "You clearly care for her. She's mine," Elias said simply. "But love doesn't always equal readiness." He stepped forward, voice iron. "You think I don't know that? You think I don't wake up every day wondering if I'm doing this right? I read. I ask questions. I build her toys with my hands. I've given her everything I never had." Marianne said nothing. She came to me with nothing but a name on a piece of paper and a screen that could shatter windows. And now she sleeps with her head on my chest and calls me Da when no one's around to hear. Tell me that don't mean something. A long pause. Marianne clicked her pen. It means everything. But the final word wouldn't be hers. The appeal would go to a regional judge in 3 weeks. Until then, Elias would have to prove that not only could he raise Briar, he was the only one who should, and someone in Hollow Bluff would do anything to make sure that didn't happen. The night after Marianne left, a fire started in Elias' barn. He saw it from the window, the orange glow flickering against the dark like the devil's grin. By the time he reached it, the blaze was climbing the walls. He kicked in the door, searching for the animals. He got 2 horses out, 1 mule. The rest didn't make it. By dawn, the barn was a black skeleton, smoke curling like accusations into the morning sky. Briar clung to his leg, silent. Sheriff Mayfield rode out at sun up. He dismounted and stared at the ruins. Someone did this. Elias didn't answer. Mayfield looked at him, hard. They want to push you out. Want to prove you can't keep her safe. Elias nodded, then walked to where his old shotgun sat leaning against the porch. He picked it up. Wiped off the ash. And whispered to himself, so low even the wind couldn't hear it. They don't know who they're messing with. To be continued. The ashes of the barn still smoldered 2 days later. Charred boards cracked and crumbled under the lightest touch. The smell clung to the air like a bad memory. Blackened beams jutted from the ground like broken ribs, a ruin where shelter once stood. The animals Elias couldn't save were buried behind the pasture, a line of fresh mounds under a crooked cedar tree. Elias hadn't spoken much since the fire. He worked in silence, hammering together a temporary shelter using salvaged timber and stubbornness. Briar watched him from the porch, seated on a worn blanket with Daisy the goat curled at her side. He had no proof who lit the blaze, no note, no tracks. Just a truth he felt in his bones. Someone wanted to make him look unfit. Maybe even scare him into giving Briar up, but they didn't understand. Elias Carver, he'd buried too much to run now. 3 days after the fire, Pastor Henry visited. He brought wood, nails, and a Bible tucked under his arm. He didn't say much. As he worked beside Elias, pounding nails into rough planks, building back what had been taken. Midday, they broke for water. The pastor wiped his brow. I told the congregation I was helping you. Some of them didn't like it. Elias didn't look up. You still came. She was left on my doorstep, Eli. I couldn't just watch from behind a pulpit. He paused. You think God makes mistakes? Elias looked at him then, eyes like storm clouds. I think sometimes people use God to cover their own. The pastor smiled faint. I think you're right. They worked until the sky turned bronze. As the pastor packed up, he turned to Elias. You ever need someone to stand with you in court, I'll be there. I've seen the way she looks at you. That kind of trust doesn't come from lies. Elias nodded. The hammer didn't leave his hand. 2 nights later, another letter arrived. No stamp, no return address. Slipped under the door like a snake. She deserves better than a murderer. Give her up before someone else gets hurt. No signature. No soul. Elias burned the letter in the stove, then sat at the table long after the fire. Died. Briar, sleepy-eyed and tangled in a hand-me-down blanket, waddled into the room. Duh. He turned. Nightmare, she said. He picked her up and sat her on his knee. I'll scare it off for you. She smiled. You always do. The next week, Elias heard from Marianne LeClaire. The appeal hearing had been moved up. The judge wanted to fast-track the case, citing community disruption and safety concerns. The rumors about the fire had reached the courthouse, though the official investigation listed the cause as undetermined. Marianne's voice was tired over the line. I'm sorry, Elias. I tried. What do I need to do? Find character witnesses. Provide documentation of your finances. Records of medical appointments, vaccinations, education plans. Show that she's thriving. Elias didn't have much of that, but he had people, and people could speak. Over the next days, he rode from ranch to ranch. From the edge of town to the far hills. He spoke to the woman at the general store, who'd once seen him give his last dollar to a family in need. He spoke to the widow, whose fence he fixed in a blizzard without asking for payment. He spoke to Doc Henley, who'd set Briar's broken finger after she fell from the porch rail and said she'd never seen a Cody father so scared or so still. One by one, they agreed to speak, some out of respect, some out of shame, but a few, like Emma Rose Kingsley, the schoolmistress, out of something deeper. She handed Elias a stack of lesson plans. Then tutoring her myself on Fridays. She knows her letters. Can count to 20. Has a stubborn streak bigger than your barn ever was. He smirked. Wonder where she got that from. Emma tucked a lock of auburn hair behind her ear. I'll testify. You just bring her in clean. She's always clean. I meant you. The courthouse sat on the far side of the county, in a town that smelled of ink and polished boots. The judge was a tall woman with hair pulled tight and a voice that brooked no nonsense. Elias wore his only clean shirt. Briar wore her Sunday dress. She held his calloused hand the whole time. They sat in the front row, waiting their turn. First came the petitioner. Elias had expected someone from Hollow Bluff, maybe the mayor, maybe one of the gossips who whispered behind covered mouths. But when the doors opened, a woman in pearls and expensive shoes walked in. She was tall, regal, dressed like money. She didn't look at Elias. The bailiff called the name from the docket. Miss Lucinda Hargrave. Briar gripped Elias' hand tighter. He whispered down, You know her? Briar shook her head slowly. Lucinda approached the bench. Your Honor, I represent the biological family of the child known as Briar. The courtroom rustled with tension. The judge raised an eyebrow. You're claiming kinship? My nephew, Lucinda said, was the child's father. We only recently learned of her existence. We intend to take her in. Elias stood. She was left on a church doorstep. No name, no claim. For 2 years no one came. Now you come crawling out when the ink's barely dry on a custody hearing. The judge banged her gavel. You will wait your turn, Mr. Carver. Elias sat, but his jaw clenched hard enough to crack teeth. The court broke for recess. In the hallway, Lucinda finally turned to him. She doesn't belong with you. Elias narrowed his eyes. You never laid eyes on her before today. Doesn't matter. She's family, and we don't let our blood get raised in dirt and dung. Blood ain't what makes a family. Staying does. Lucinda scoffed. You think a man like you can give her what she needs? He stepped closer. I already have. The second half of the hearing brought witness after witness. Pastor Henry spoke first. I've seen hardened men walk through fire and never change. Elias Carver changed because of her. Then came Emma Kingsley. That child walks into the schoolhouse with her chin high and her boots muddy. She doesn't know she's different, because Elias never let her feel it. Doc Henley spoke, Sheriff Mayfield. Even Mrs. Kingsley, who admitted she didn't trust Elias at first. But now, I'd leave my grandbabies with him. Without blinking. The judge took it all in. Then she called Elias forward. You have the final word. Elias stepped up. He looked at Lucinda. Then at Briar, who sat swinging her feet, clutching her toy goat. Then he looked at the judge. I was a mistake once. That's what they called me. No mother, father gone. Bounced from place to place like a sack of potatoes. He paused. Then my brother took me in. Raised me as his own. Taught me right from wrong. He died protecting someone else. And that left me with a hole nothing could fill. He swallowed. Then she came, left on a doorstep. Like I was. And I knew then I wasn't just getting a daughter. I was getting a chance to finish what Jesse started. He looked at the judge. I'm not perfect. I'm not rich, but I am present, and I don't quit. Not on her. Not on myself. Not ever. The judge sat in silence for a long moment. Then she spoke. "I will issue my ruling tomorrow. Court is adjourned." Elias picked up Briar as they stepped into the fading light of evening. He heard Lucinda say one thing behind them. "Enjoy your last night with her." He kept walking, but his hand never left the pistol under his coat. Elias Carver didn't sleep that night, not in the way people mean it. He lay on his back with Briar's small body curled on his chest, her breath a steady rhythm against his ribs. But his eyes never closed, not fully, not with Lucinda Hargraves. Words repeating in his mind like a church bell rung by a madman. Enjoy your last night with her. The fire, the letter, the sudden reappearance of a family that had never claimed her. It all made sense now. Lucinda had been behind it from the start. She hadn't just stumbled onto Briar's existence. She'd known, watched, waited, and when Elias had finally been recognized by law, she struck like a snake from tall grass. And tomorrow, a single person would decide whether he lost the only thing that had ever made him whole. At dawn, he saddled his horse, left Briar sleeping. He didn't leave a note. There was no one to read it. The wind was sharp, even under the rising sun, and the land around Hollow Bluff wore its frost like armor. Elias rode hard, pushing into the hills past Widow's Hollow, then cut north toward the place no man mentioned unless he had to. Drywell Ridge. It wasn't a town. Not anymore. Once, it had been a mining camp. Then it became something else. A place for men who couldn't go home. A refuge for the lawless and the half-dead. Elias had known men there. Years ago. Before Jesse, before Briar, before he tried becoming something more than a quick draw and a last name. He reached the ridge. Near midday. It was smaller than he remembered. Shacks leaned like drunkards against the wind. Smoke curled from one chimney. A tin sign flapped on rusted hinges. A buzzard circled overhead, reminding everyone what happened when you stopped moving. Elias dismounted, walked toward the saloon. Inside, it smelled like sweat, regret, and burnt coffee. The man behind the bar wore a scar across his cheek and an expression that said he didn't care whether you lived or died, as long as you paid. Elias spoke 2 words. "Need Mason." The barkeep didn't blink, just tilted his head toward the back. Elias found him in a room with no windows. Long hair streaked with white. A silver cross around his neck, but no Bible in sight. He sat at a table whittling a piece of wood that would never become anything. He looked up slowly. "I was wondering how long you'd wait." Elias sat across from him. "I need a name. The one who torched my barn. Sent the letter." Mason smiled, thin and hollow. "You always come to me with vengeance. Never hello. Never had time for pleasantries." Mason leaned back. The letter came from Hargrave's courier. Her lawyer's clerk, most likely. The fire, hired job. Local hand named Silas Ridge. Been floating from saloon to saloon, picking up dirty work. He talks in his sleep. Elias's jaw tensed. "You sure?" "He was drunk 2 nights ago. Spilled everything to Rosie." "Where is he now?" "Gone. Left with Hargrave's lawyer the morning after. Probably headed to the hearing, in case things go sideways." Elias stood. Mason didn't. "You gonna kill him?" Elias hesitated. "No. That's not the Elias I remember." "That Elias died. We all say that," Mason murmured. "But the past is long legs." When Elias returned home, Briar was waiting on the porch. "Where you go?" He crouched down, arms wide. "To make sure tomorrow doesn't go wrong." She wrapped her arms around his neck. "Scary dream, again." He lifted her. "I know. But we wake up together, don't we?" She nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. "We always do." The courthouse was colder than he remembered, not from temperature. From the way people looked at him. Lucinda Hargraves sat at the plaintiff's table, in satin gloves. Her lawyer, a man with a face like a rat's and the voice of a velvet snake, Spoke softly with the clerk. Elias sat with Briar, one arm draped protectively around her small shoulders. The judge entered. Hammered the gavel. "Before we begin," she said, "Mr. Carver, I have received new information. An affidavit. Anonymous. It accuses you of violence, endangerment, and associations with known criminals. Care to respond?" Elias stood. "I've done bad things, but not to her. Never to her." The judge tapped her pen. Lucinda's lawyer rose. "Your Honor, the Hargrave family is prepared to assume full responsibility for the child. Financial, emotional, legal." He gestured to Lucinda. "She can provide the child with education, stability, culture, a real life. Not one of chickens and dirt floors." Elias said nothing. The judge looked at Briar. "Young lady, do you want to say anything today?" The room held its breath. Briar looked up, then climbed onto the seat. "I want Day." The lawyer stepped forward. "She's a child, Your Honor. Easily manipulated, and not." Briar shouted. The room jumped. She pointed at Lucinda. "She doesn't know me. She never held me when I cried. Never made me soup when I was sick. Never sang to me when I was scared." Her voice cracked. "That did." She turned to the judge. "Please don't. Make me leave. I'll be good." The judge blinked. Lucinda stood abruptly. Clearly the child has been influenced. Possibly even coached. Elias rose. "No, she speaks because no one else would. Because someone had to." He looked at the judge. "Let me tell you what no affidavit will. When I was 16, I shot a man. He'd come at my brother with a bottle. I didn't think. I pulled the trigger. He swallowed. I ran. Because I thought I'd become the thing I feared." His hands shook. "But Briar, she made me see I was more than that one night. She made me want to stay, to fight right, to be the kind of man I'd want her to marry someday." He looked down at his daughter. "You want to judge me for my past? Fine, but don't take her future to do it." The judge called for recess. During the break, Elias sat on the bench in the hallway. Briar asleep on his lap. He didn't see Lucinda approach until she stood in front of him. "You think you've won?" He didn't respond. "You're a child yourself, Elias. One heartbreak away from breaking again." He looked up. "Then I guess it's a good thing I've learned how to hold on." She scoffed. "Enjoy this little victory. But men like you always lose the long game." He stared at her. "Not when we teach someone else how to win it." When court reconvened, the judge did not delay. She adjusted her glasses. "The law considers blood, but it also considers the best interest of the child. And in my judgment, Briar's interest lies not in wealth or pedigree, but in the arms of the one who has never let her go." She looked at Elias. "Custody remains with Mr. Carver. Appeal denied." Lucinda stood abruptly. "This isn't over." But the judge had already banged the gavel. Outside, the sky had turned soft with snowfall. Briar danced in the flakes, arms outstretched. Elias watched her, then turned to find Lucinda gone. Marianne Leclerc approached. "She may try again." Elias nodded. "Then I'll be ready." Marianne smiled. "You're not just raising a child. You're raising a future." He looked at Briar. "Then I better not mess it up." She ran toward him, giggling. Snow." He caught her, lifting her high. "Let it fall. We're not going anywhere." Snow blanketed the land like a prayer spoken softly, covering the scars of old battles and new beginnings alike. Elias Carver stood on the porch of his cabin with Briar nestled in the crook of his arm. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, and her breath curled in the air like smoke from a chimney. Below them, the rebuilt barn stood proud and solid, its roof glinting under the morning frost. They had won. For now, but peace, Elias knew, was not a gift freely given. It was something you built with your hands and defended with your soul. 3 days had passed since the judge denied Lucinda Hargrave's appeal. Word had spread fast. At the general store, Folks stopped him to shake his hand. Doc Henley brought over extra firewood. Emma Kingsley dropped off a bag of children's books with a note for Briar, who already knows how to speak her truth. But not everyone was happy. One afternoon, Elias returned from mending fence posts to find his front gate open, the hinges twisted, and his chicken coop door swinging. All the birds were gone, and carved into the wood of the door was one word, Tac. He stood there a long time, hand resting on his belt where the colt hadn't left his side since the hearing. Briar peeked out from the cabin. "Chickie's gone." "Yeah, Little Bean. Will they come back?" He shook his head. "No, but I'll get more." She nodded. "Good, Daisy misses them." He ruffled her hair. "Daisy's got you." "That's enough trouble for any goat." She beamed. The next letter arrived 2 days later. Typed, "Clean. Legal. Petition for emergency reconsideration of custody. Filed by Lucinda Hargrave under grounds of moral endangerment and environmental instability." Attached was an affidavit. This time, not anonymous, Silas Ridge. He claimed Elias had threatened him, had a history of violence. Said the barn fire was a result of Elias' own enemies, not an attack. The words stung more than Elias wanted to admit. He stared at the paper, jaw tight. He had gone to Ridge, had wanted to hurt him, but he hadn't, and still, here he was, bleeding for sins he hadn't even committed. Briar climbed onto his lap, pressing her head against his chest. "What does it say?" "It says someone wants to take you again." She was quiet a moment. Then snow blanketed the land like a prayer spoken softly, covering the scars of old battles and new beginnings alike. Elias Carver stood on the porch of his cabin with Briar nestled in the crook of his arm. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, and her breath curled in the air like smoke from a chimney. Below them, the rebuilt barn stood proud and solid, its roof glinting under the morning frost. They had won. For now, but peace, Elias knew, was not a gift freely given. It was something you built with your hands and defended with your soul. 3 days had passed since the judge denied Lucinda Hargrave's appeal. Word had spread fast. At the general store, folks stopped him to shake his hand. Doc Henley brought over extra firewood. Emma Kingsley dropped off a bag of children's books with a note for Briar, who already knows how to speak her truth. But not everyone was happy. One afternoon, Elias returned from mending fence posts to find his front gate open, the hinges twisted, and his chicken coop door swinging. All the birds were gone, and carved into the wood of the door was one word, Tac. He stood there a long time, hand resting on his belt where the colt hadn't left his side since the hearing. Briar peeked out from the cabin. "Chickie's gone." "Yeah, Little Bean. Will they come back?" He shook his head. "No, but I'll get more." She nodded. "Good, Daisy misses them." He ruffled her hair. "Daisy's got you." "That's enough trouble for any goat." She beamed. The next letter arrived 2 days later. Typed, "Clean. Legal. Petition for emergency reconsideration of custody. Filed by Lucinda Hargrave under grounds of moral endangerment and environmental instability." Attached was an affidavit. This time, not anonymous, Silas Ridge. He claimed Elias had threatened him, had a history of violence. Said the barn fire was a result of Elias' own enemies, not an attack. The words stung more than Elias wanted to admit. He stared at the paper, jaw tight. He had gone to Ridge, had wanted to hurt him, but he hadn't, and still, here he was, bleeding for sins he hadn't even committed. Briar climbed onto his lap, pressing her head against his chest. "What does it say?" "It says someone wants to take you again." She was quiet a moment. Then she said, with all the certainty a child could carry, "They can't, not if I hold on." Mary Ann came out that night. She sat at his kitchen table with a mug of strong coffee and a file thick with papers. "The judge didn't grant the emergency motion, but the case is still active. Lucinda's playing the long game." Elias nodded. Then so am I, Marianne hesitated. There's another way, a long shot. But maybe the only thing that puts this to rest. For good. Elias raised an eyebrow. Adoption. He blinked. She continued. If you legally adopt her, you become more than a guardian. You become her father in the eyes of the law. I already am. I know. But this would close the door on Lucinda. She'd have no claim, not unless she could prove fraud or abuse. Elias looked at Briar, playing on the floor with a wooden train he'd carved. What do I have to do? File, appear before a panel, pass a formal home study. You mean get judged all over again? Yes, but this time it's your move. The paperwork. Took weeks. Every inch of Elias' life was poured into black ink. His income, his history, his trauma. Every scar and sin laid bare in typed lines. He had to sit through interviews with counselors, social workers, state officials who shook hands too softly and smiled too thin. They asked about his childhood. His anger, the shooting. They asked about Jesse. And about the night Elias had nearly taken his own life. Whiskey bottle in one hand, revolver in the other. He didn't lie. He didn't cry either. He simply told them the truth. That Briar had saved him before she even knew how to speak. That she taught him how to fight without fists, how to care without running. That she was the first thing in his life that made him want to stay. In the middle of it all, Hollow Bluff held its spring fair. Elias never went. Too many eyes. Too many reminders, but Briar wanted to go. She tugged his hand for days until he said yes. They arrived just as the wind that swept across the valley in early summer carried no threat. Just the dry rustle of grass and the whisper of days warming into something that looked like peace. For the first time in a long while, Elias Carver felt like he could breathe. Not just for himself, but for the small hand that clutched his each morning when they stepped onto the porch and stared out at the land that was slowly, impossibly, becoming theirs. Briar Carver. No longer just a foundling with a note tied to her blanket. Now a daughter, legally, fully, entirely his, and that truth carried through everything. In the way she ran through the pasture with Daisy at her heels, in the way the neighbors stopped by with pies instead of warnings, and in the way Elias began to fix things he'd once let rot, like the gate, the roof shingles, the long dead apple tree behind the barn. He planted a new one. Briar helped. Said they should name it. Let's call it Jesse, she said as she patted dirt around the base. So it grows strong. Elias nodded. Jesse it is. But even as the world warmed, shadows lingered in Hollow Bluff. Lucinda Hargrave had gone quiet, but silence from her corner never meant surrender. Marianne warned him that Lucinda had taken a trip to Helena, meeting with lawmakers, stirring the pot from a higher level. She won't get custody, Marianne said, seated on the porch one morning, sipping black coffee. But she might make sure. No one like you gets a fair shot again. Elias looked out over the fence line. Then I guess I'll make it my business to prove folks like me should have one. That summer, Briar turned 5. Emma Kingsley threw a party in the schoolyard. It was the first time Elias had seen Briar with other children her age, laughing, running, falling and laughing again. She wore a red dress with a daisy pin at the collar. Said it matched the goat. Elias stood at the edge of the gathering, arms folded, a smile he didn't realize was on his face until Doc Hanley clapped him on the back. You look like a man who just saw the future and liked what he saw. She's getting tall. They do that, Elias nodded. Time don't ask permission. No, the doctor said, but it sure as hell grants second chances if you pay attention. That night, Briar fell asleep with her new toys scattered across the floor, a wooden horse, a half-eaten cookie, and a book titled Brave Lily and the Lightning Tree. Elias tucked her in, then sat on the porch until long after moonrise. The stars were thick, the wind soft. And for the first time in a long while, he didn't feel like he had to watch his back until he heard the whistle. 3 notes, low, drawn. And Old signal. One used between riders during the war. He rose, stepped into the yard. Saw the silhouette near the fence. Broad, cloaked, familiar. Elias, came the voice. Deep, dusty. It's been a while. Elias squinted. His gut tightened. Grady? Thought I'd find you with your back to the mountains. Grady Beaumont, once a scout, once a killer, once Elias's closest friend, until the day Elias walked away and Grady didn't follow. What are you doing here? Grady leaned against the fence post. Looking for work, looking for truth. Heard you were raising a ghost child in the middle of nowhere. She's no ghost. That's the story, though. That she came with nothing but a name and eyes that don't blink when the world burns. Elias didn't smile. What do you want? Grady shrugged. A place to rest. A drink, maybe a job. Not much here for men like we used to be. Maybe not. But I figured if a man like you can raise a daughter, maybe a man like me can fix a fence. They sat at the table that night, whiskey between them. Grady's eyes hadn't changed. Still the color of dried blood and bad memories. I heard about Lucinda, he said. Should try again. Or someone like her. Then you'll need a friend who remembers how to make bad people regret their decisions. Elias sipped. I don't want that life. You might not. But if she comes for the girl, what you want won't matter. They drank in silence for a while. Then Grady asked the question Elias had feared from the start. She yours, blood-wise? Elias looked toward the back room, where Briar slept. She's mine. That's all that matters. 2 weeks later, Grady was still there, and Hollow Bluff had begun to murmur. Another gunfighter on the Carver place. Trouble must be brewing. Why would a child need two shadows with guns? Elias ignored it. Until the school board sent a letter. Concerns have been raised about the child's safety environment. Emma came to the ranch herself, face red with fury. It's ridiculous, petty. They want to review her place in the school, might even try to remove her. Elias stared at the letter, then burned it. Let them come. They did. One morning, 3 men arrived in a buggy with polished shoes and eyes that didn't know dirt. Grady watched from the barn. Elias met them on the porch. We're here to speak about Briar. She's at school. Where she belongs. The tallest man adjusted his tie. We have concerns about your influence, about what she's being exposed to. You mean a man trying to raise his daughter? We mean the company you keep, the history you carry, the environment you cultivate. Elias stepped down the stairs. You ever bury a brother? They blinked. You ever hold a child through the worst fever of her life, not knowing if she'll breathe the next hour? Ever spend every dime you have on books because you know words might save her one day? Silence. Didn't think so. Now get off my land. They left. But not fast, not afraid. Just calculating. Grady spit in the dirt. They'll be back. Elias nodded. Let them. That night, Briar found Elias under the apple sapling. Why do people hate us? He looked up. They don't. They're just afraid of what they don't understand. But we didn't do anything. He pulled her into his lap. Sometimes just existing is enough to scare small minds. But we don't shrink. She looked up at the stars. I want to be brave like you. He kissed her forehead. Then you already are. The wind shifted that August. It came down from the mountains dry and mean, curling dust devils across the edge of Hollow Bluff and whispering through cottonwoods like a warning. People started locking their doors earlier. The saloon quieted. And even the schoolhouse bell sounded more cautious when it rang, because everyone knew the Hargrave name hadn't vanished. It had just gone quiet. Elias could feel it in his bones. That old pull. That itch under the ribs that said trouble wasn't done with him yet. But this time, he wasn't alone. Grady Beaumont had taken up full-time work on the ranch, fixing what Elias didn't have time to notice and saying even less. The man could go hours without a word, then drop a sentence that hit like a nail through pine. One afternoon, while patching a fence line, Grady said, "You ever wonder if Jesse would have made the same choices?" Elias didn't look up. "Every day. And he would have stayed, like me, because she was worth it." Grady nodded. "Then so is the fight." On the second Monday of the month, a new figure arrived in Hollow Bluff. A woman. She wore riding pants tailored too clean for the dust and gloves that hadn't known a hard day's work. Her boots clacked like court orders. She introduced herself as Regina Falk, state-appointed Educational Standards Evaluator. "I'm here to assess the academic environment of this county," she told the school board. Starting with the child known as Briar Carver, Emma Kingsley nearly dropped her chalk. "Ma'am, this is a one-room schoolhouse. She's 5. Regina adjusted her spectacles. "And subject to state oversight. That includes home environment inquiries." Emma stood firm. "You'll need to talk to her father first." Regina smiled. "Oh, I intend to." Elias wasn't surprised when she rode up the next morning. He was chopping wood. Briar was nearby, collecting wildflowers in a woven basket. Regina dismounted with the stiffness of someone who wasn't used to horses, but wouldn't admit it. "Mr. Carver, I presume." He set the axe down. "You are?" "Regina Falk, Education Auditor. I need to observe Briar's home setting." "You mean inspect, if you like." He didn't invite her in, but he didn't stop her either. She stepped inside and made notes. About the books, the dust, the walls lined with handmade shelves and drawings done in crayon. "You made these?" she asked Briar. "All by myself." "They showed me how to draw the horse." Regina scribbled. After an hour, she closed her notebook. "Your daughter is precocious, sharp. But what?" Regina hesitated. "She mimics your speech patterns. Your mannerisms." Elias raised an eyebrow. "She lives here, eats here, grows here. What else would she mimic?" "There are concerns." "By who? Lucinda Hargrave?" Regina flinched. "Just slightly. This isn't personal. It never is. Until they come to take what you bled for." Regina left. But her visit shook loose something that had been building for weeks. Rumors. That Briar had violent tendencies. That she'd been heard talking to herself in class. That she drew pictures of men with guns. Emma tried to quash them. But fear has long legs and a sharp tongue. Elias found Briar crying on the porch after school one day. "They said I'm dangerous, that I talk like a soldier." He crouched in front of her. "You're not dangerous, you're strong. There's a difference. Why are they scared of me?" He pulled her close. "Because you're brave in a way they don't understand." A week later, Grady rode into town to pick up supplies. When he returned, his knuckles were bloody. "What happened?" Elias asked. Grady tossed the sack onto the porch. A man named Preston Hargrave was asking questions, loudly, about what kind of girl gets raised by a killer. Elias stiffened. "You hit him?" "No. He hit the ground." Briar came outside, munching on an apple. "Everything okay?" Elias nodded. "Just cleaning up messes." Grady murmured, "More to come." That night, Elias dug up the lockbox he hadn't touched since Jesse died. Inside was a photograph. 2 boys, one smiling, one not. And beneath it, the old U.S. Marshal badge that hadn't seen sunlight in 15 years. Grady watched from the doorway. "You really going to put that back on?" Elias turned it in his hand. "Maybe it's time they remember who I used to be." The badge felt heavier than Elias remembered. He held it in the firelight that night, the worn silver glinting like a ghost of who he'd once been. U.S. Marshal Elias Carver. A title he'd earned with blood, grit, and too many nights staring at a jail cell door while the guilty slept easier than he did. He'd walked away from that life when Jesse was killed, turned in his star, buried his gun, and rode until the land stopped asking questions. But now? Now the questions were writing in fast and bold, knocking on his daughter's classroom door, and if he didn't answer soon, someone else would. He didn't. Pin it on. Not yet, but he didn't bury it again either. He tucked it into his coat pocket, next to the folded note that had come with Briar the day she was left outside St. Jude's. Her name is Briar. She is loved. Please keep her safe, he reread. It. Then lit a match, burned it, because she wasn't just someone to protect anymore. She was someone to fight beside. The next day, Elias rode into Hollow Bluff, not hunched, not cautious, straight-backed, hat low, holster visible, badge in his pocket. He walked into the sheriff's office and placed it on the desk in front of Sheriff Mayfield. The older man stared at it like it had teeth. That's supposed to be a warning? It's a promise. I ain't looking to wear it again unless I have to. But I want the record to show something. If anyone else comes for Briar under false pretenses, I won't wait on process. Mayfield leaned back. Lot of folks still remember the man who wore that. He wasn't soft. Elias met his eyes. I'm softer now. That just means when I break, I splinter deeper. 2 days later, Briar came home from school and slammed the door. They called me a mistake. Elias froze. Who did? Willa and her sister. Sighed. I don't have a real mother. Said I was abandoned. She was shaking, her eyes glassy. Said you were just a stray who picked up another stray. Elias crouched, but she pulled away. Is it true? That you don't have a mother here? Yeah. That I picked you up like a dropped coin? No, I chose you, Briar, like a man chooses his sunrise after too many nights. She sniffled. Then how come they get to say I'm nothing? He lifted her chin. Because they only know names, not stories, not roots, but we know. And that's enough. She hugged him then, tighter than she ever had. The next school meeting was held in the church basement. Elias showed up with Briar. Grady followed, silent as ever. Most of Hollow Bluff was there. The room buzzed with tension. On the agenda, educational safety, home influence, community image. Lucinda Hargrave wasn't present, but her shadow loomed over every word. When the floor opened for discussion, a man named Collier stood. I just think we need to ask ourselves what kind of example is being set. Guns on hips, a known drifter living with a child. Is that education, or trouble waiting to grow up wrong? Emma Kingsley shot up from her seat. You want to talk about influence? Briar reads better than half my students. She shares her lunch when others go hungry. She leads recess with fairness. She's 5 and she acts more grown than most of the men here. Murmurs. Then Elias stood. The room hushed. He stepped forward slowly. No flash, no shout, just truth. I buried my brother when I was 23. I rode for the marshal's office for years after that, chasing men who made widows and orphans. Thought if I punished enough evil, I could outrun my own. Didn't work. He glanced at Briar. Then she came. Left on a doorstep. And I saw a chance to be the man Jesse always believed I could be. Not with bullets, but with breakfasts, bedtime stories, fence repairs. He turned to the crowd. You want to judge the way she lives? Fine, but judge me first. Judge the nights I held her through fever, the mornings I packed her lunch. Judge the quiet hours I carved her name into this land. Silence. Then someone clapped. 1. Then 2. Then more. Grady watched from the back. Said nothing. Didn't need to. That night, Elias found Briar in the barn, brushing Daisy. You okay? I think so. She paused. Did I do something wrong, Da? Nada. Damn thing, you told the truth. That scares folks who only know how to lie to themselves. She looked up. You'll always keep me? He knelt. No, her face fell. I won't keep you. I'll raise you. So one day, you won't need keeping at all. She smiled. Then I'll come back, to help. He hugged her. That's all I'll ever need. But Hollow Bluff wasn't done. 2 nights later, Elias awoke to the sound of gunfire. Grady was already outside, shotgun in hand. The barn door was splintered. Someone had painted across the side, in red, "Shadows raise monsters." They were gone before Elias could track the hoofprints. Left behind nothing but smoke and hate, he stared at the words until dawn. Then, he went inside Dot and pinned the badge to his coat. The town of Hollow Bluff woke to the sound of silence. A barn half burned, paint still fresh on scorched wood, and a man who hadn't worn a badge in 15 years now rode through Main Street with it pinned square on his chest. Elias Carver didn't look left or right, didn't tip his hat. Just rode slow, steady, straight to the sheriff's office. Sheriff Mayfield stood on the steps, arms crossed. "You really going through with this?" Elias dismounted. "Already have." He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a letter, signed by the territorial governor, an old friend of Jesse's, official reinstatement as Deputy U.S. Marshal. Mayfield took the letter, skimmed it, then whistled low. "You always did skip the stairs and take the roof. Didn't come to step on toes. Came to make it clear, if someone keeps trying to scare my girl out of her own life, I'm not asking anymore." "I'm acting," Mayfield nodded. "Then act smart." Word spread fast. By midday, everyone knew Elias Carver was back in the saddle. And the badge wasn't for show. He started with Preston Hargrave. Found him drinking at the Dove's Rest Saloon, spinning tales about raising funds for a new town monument. In reality, he was paying boys to ride at night with torches and paint. Elias tossed him into a cell without a second word, then rode to the edge of Hargrave land. Lucinda wasn't home. Her foreman was. Elias handed him a formal warning. "Next time someone from this place rides to harm mine, the land gets seized under Federal Statute 1867. Property used in intimidation is property forfeited." The man sputtered. "You can't, I just did." That night, Elias returned home to find Briar asleep on the porch swing. Daisy curled beneath her. Grady leaned against a post. "She waited up. Said she wanted to see you come back wearing the star." Elias sat beside her. "How long was she out here?" "Long enough to whisper that she wasn't scared anymore." Elias felt something catch in his throat. "Then we're doing something right. But right doesn't mean easy." The next week, letters began arriving from Helena, legalese wrapped in threats, formal inquiries into Elias' fitness to serve, complaints filed by concerned citizens. He handed them to Marianne. She read them, then tossed them into the fire. "They're fishing, trying to rattle you. They're wasting paper." "I won't rattle." She looked him over. "No, but you'll bleed. And they'll count on that." On Friday, Briar came home with a black eye. She held her head high. "Willa tried to pull my ribbon. I pushed her." Elias knelt. "That would gave you the shiner." "No, her brother punched me." Elias stared. "And you?" "Hit him with my book." He paused. "Was it a big book?" She nodded. "The dictionary." Grady laughed from the barn. "Girls got style." Elias pulled her close. "You did right. But next time, find the teacher." "I did. After I used the book." A week passed with no attacks. No letters. No smoke. Then a man showed up, dressed in black. No dust on his boots. He introduced himself as Mr. Ingram, representative of a private firm that managed educational and legal restructuring for frontier towns. Miss Hargrave has graciously funded a reassessment of Hollow Bluff's municipal needs. Elias narrowed his eyes. "That a fancy way of saying she's trying to buy out the school board?" "It's about efficiency." "No, it's about control." Ingram smiled thinly. "You can oppose the future, but it comes all the same." Elias stepped closer. "Maybe. But sometimes the past rides out to meet it. And the past shoots straighter." Ingram left, but the next day, Emma Kingsley was removed from her position. The new teacher arrived in a rail cart, hair slicked, voice clipped. He introduced himself as Mr. Calder. "I believe in order, structure, and respect. Within 2 days, Briar came home with her books confiscated. He said girls don't need extra readers. Said I should focus on handwriting. Elias stormed to the schoolhouse. Confronted Calder. You think reading makes her uppity? I think it breeds rebellion. Then let her rebel, and keep your hands off her education. Or what? Elias flashed the badge. You'll be on the next cart. Out. Calder didn't argue. He just packed up and left. By month's end, Briar was back to herself. The town had shifted. People who once whispered now stood beside Elias. Doc Hanley started holding free lectures at the church. Emma returned to teaching in a volunteer role. Marianne pushed a bill to protect community schools from private interference. And Grady? Grady started carving wooden toys. What are those for? Elias asked. Grady grunted. Briar, future students, insurance. Elias chuckled. Never thought I'd see the day. Didn't think I'd live long enough. On the first day of autumn, Elias found Briar beneath the apple tree. It grew, she whispered, and it had. The sapling Jessie had planted was strong now. A single red apple hung from its highest branch. Can we pick it? Elias lifted her up. Together. She twisted it free. They shared it in silence. Sweet, crisp, like something earned. But peace never stays long in places like Hollow Bluff. Because just before sunset, a rider came. Fast. Dust trailing. He pulled up to the ranch gate, breathless. There. Coming. A group, armed. Lucinda hired mercenaries. Said if the law won't work, she'd take what's hers by force. Elias stood still, then turned to Grady. Saddle up. The dusk wind hasted like ash and thunder. Elias Carver stood at the edge of his land, the weight of the badge pressing against his chest like a warning. Grady tightened the cinch on his saddle beside him, his face as calm as the loaded rifle slung over his shoulder. Behind them, the ranch lay still, the apple tree silhouetted against the orange sky. Briar watched from the porch, clutching Daisy's collar. Stay inside, Elias told her. I can help. You already have. Every day you live honest, you help. She nodded. No tears. Just fire, Grady muttered. She gets that from you. No, Elias said. She gets that from being forged. The mercenaries came at twilight. 6 of them. Dark coats. Long rifles. One with a whip coiled at his hip like he thought he was born in a worse time and came here to prove it. They rode up with the slow arrogance of men who never expected to be stopped. Elias and Grady waited at the fence line. The leader reined in, looked Elias over. Carver, you're a lawman now? Thought you hung that up. Picked it back up right after someone painted threats on my barn. The man grinned. We're not here to paint. We're here to collect. There's nothing for you to collect but lead. The man raised a hand. The others shifted in their saddles. You really willing to die for a girl that ain't even yours? Grady chambered around. He's not dying. You are. The first shot came from behind the mercenaries. A warning dot had kicked up dirt near the horses, sending them into nervous steps. From the tree line, Doc Hanley stepped out. Rifle raised. Then Emma. Then Sheriff Mayfield. Then half of Hollow Bluff. Men and women with pitchforks, pistols, axes, and hearts full of something Lucinda Hargrave never understood. Community. The lead mercenary spat. You brought a parade. Elias didn't smile. No, they came on their own. You ain't just threatening me. You threatened all of us. What followed wasn't a gunfight. It was a reckoning. The mercenaries backed off. Slow, outnumbered, outgunned, outwilled. One broke and ran. Sheriff Mayfield rode after him. The others turned tail. Grady watched them go, then muttered, Never thought I'd see the day courage outpaced bullets. Elias didn't reply. He just turned, climbed the steps, and gathered Briar in his arms. Night. They held a fire at the center of town. Not a bonfire, a funeral pyre, for fear. Elias threw the painted plank from his barn into the flames. One by one, others added tokens, a broken gavel, a copy of the letter from Helena, even Grady tossed. In his old cavalry knife, Doc Hanley raised a glass. To the girl who reminded a town it still had a spine. They drank, they sang, they watched smoke carry away the last of what held them down. 3 days later, a letter arrived from Lucinda. No threats. No legalese. Just a signature on a formal document. Custodial surrender. Marianne brought it in herself. It's over, legally. She signed away all claims. Elias stared at the paper, then looked at Briar. That mean we're free? You always were, Marianne said. Just needed the world to catch up. Elias didn't ride into town the next morning. He took Briar fishing. They sat on the riverbank, toes in the water, poles in hand. She leaned on his shoulder. You still a marshal? Only if someone needs one. Do I? He smiled. Not anymore. They watched the water. Peaceful. Real. Earned. But one last ghost remained. Grady came to him that evening. I got a letter. From who? The ones who sent Briar here. Elias tensed. Grady handed it over. It was from a convent in Colorado. The seal matched. The corner of the blanket Briar had been wrapped in. The letter was short. We kept our promise. She was delivered to someone who could keep her safe. If one day she asks, tell her we chose well. Elias folded the letter. She doesn't need to know yet, Grady nodded. But one day she will. And when she does, she already know the answer. That night, Elias tucked Briar in. She held her stuffed goat tight. You think Daisy dreams? Probably. About fields she hasn't eaten yet. Briar giggled. Then she asked softly, Am I really yours? Forever? Elias didn't hesitate. You were mine before I even knew how much I needed you. She smiled. Then I'll keep you too. The ranch stood silent under the stars, but inside, love breathed steady. And nothing, not badges, not blood, not battles, could ever take that away. Autumn rolled in slow, like an old dog settling down by the fire. The hills around Hollow Bluff wore coats of copper and gold. The creek ran low but steady. The wind turned softer, less like a warning and more like a hymn, and Elias Carver felt, for the first time in his life, like he was living after something instead of inside it. Grady patched the barn roof. Emma kept the school running with chalk and borrowed books. Briar lost her second tooth and buried it under the apple tree. I don't need coins, she said. I want roots. Elias didn't have words for that. Just a long, quiet pride. They hosted a harvest dinner, not just for themselves, but for the whole town. Tables set between fence lines, children running with pies, dogs barking, fiddles playing into the evening. Hanley read a short prayer. Emma brought 3 loaves of cornbread. Marianne made stew that had half the town asking for the recipe. When the stars came out, Elias stood to speak. He wasn't good with speeches, never had been, but he didn't need to be. He just raised a glass and said, Thank you for standing when it counted, for choosing what's right when it wasn't easy, for showing my girl what a town can be. And that was enough. Later that week, Briar came home with a drawing. It showed 3 figures under a tree, one tall, one medium, one small, all holding hands. Who's the third one? Elias asked. You, me, and Jesse. He blinked. You never met Jesse. She nodded. But I feel him. Like a story that makes you feel better, even if you weren't there. He swallowed hard. That's exactly what he was. Marianne visited one Sunday, brought news. Lucinda sold her holdings, packed up, left for the East. Elias didn't ask where, didn't care. Some ghosts need distance more than graves. Marianne poured coffee. You ever think about moving? Only every time I remember what we fought for, she smiled. Good answer. Grady started teaching woodwork to the older boys, said he needed someone to carry on his bad habits. Briar tried once. Made a crooked birdhouse. It leans, she said. Grady tapped it. So does every good thing that ever stood in a storm. Then winter whispered at the edges. Briar grew taller, smarter, bolder. She could read aloud now. Elias caught her once, reading from Brave Lily and the Lightning Tree to Daisy in the Barn. See, she told the goat. She didn't run, she stood. Daisy chewed her cud. Seemed to agree. They celebrated Christmas with a tree. Briar cut herself. Grady carved a wooden star. Doc Hanley brought peppermint sticks. Elias gave Briar a journal. For your words, he said, so they don't get lost. She hugged it like it was gold, wrote on the first page, I belong, right here. Forever. And yet, even peace carries shadows. One afternoon in January, Elias got a letter. No return address, inside. A newspaper clipping from a city he didn't recognize. Headline, Orphanage burned. Survivors relocated, and a photo of a woman, scarred, holding a child, behind her. In the smoke, a small mural. The same flower Briar had drawn on her first day of school. Daisy. Elias felt his stomach twist. Grady walked in. Read over his shoulder. Think. It means what I think it means. She wasn't just left here. She was hidden. Grady leaned on the table. You going to tell her? Not yet, but I might need to find out more. You think trouble's coming again? Elias folded the clipping. I think truth is. And truth can be just as loud. That night, he sat by Briar's bed, watched her sleep, listened to her breathing, outside. The stars flickered. Inside, the fire crackled low. He didn't feel fear, just purpose. Because whatever came next, it wouldn't come for his shadow. It would come for his daughter. And this time, the man waiting would be more than just a rancher. He'd be the storm. Snow came in thick that February. It blanketed Hollow Bluff in a hush, muffling footsteps and softening even the hardest of edges. The apple tree stood bare but proud. Its limbs stretched like arms resting after a long fight. Elias Carver moved. Slower these days. Not from age. Not from pain. From presence. He listened more, watched deeper, held moments longer, and in that stillness, something stirred. Something old. Something unfinished. The letter came with no return address, just a postmark. From Colorado Springs. Inside, another photo. This time, it showed a worn stone wall with graffiti sprayed across it. She is the seed. Keep her safe. Briar saw it. Is that about me? Elias looked her in the eye. I think it might be. Why would someone write that? Because maybe you matter more than even I realized. Grady rode into town to ask around, returned 3 days later. With a name, Mother Serafini. Used to run the orphanage in the Springs. Went underground after the fire. But there's whispers she's still alive. Elias packed his saddlebag. I'll go. Alone. Briar grabbed his coat. I want to come. Not this time, darlin'. This is about where you came from. I need to see it first. Make sure it's safe. She didn't cry, just nodded. Fierce. Steady, like a Carver. The road to Colorado Springs was half-melted ice and silence. Elias arrived by dusk and found the ruins of the orphanage on the edge of the city's oldest quarter. Blackened stone, shattered windows. Silence thick as the cold. He waited until nightfall. Then a voice behind him. You shouldn't be here. A woman. Hooded, wrinkled hands. Scars where her left eye should have been. Mother Serafini? Depends who's asking. Elias Carver. I'm raising a girl named Briar. Left on a church doorstep 5 years ago. She stiffened. Then you already did the hard part. They talked until morning. Serafini poured tea from an old kettle and told stories that chilled the bones. There was a program, she said. Unofficial, hidden. They took certain children. Called them seeds. Said they were different. Smarter, stronger, made for more. Elias's jaw clenched. You saying they experimented on kids? Not in the way you think. No needles, just plans. Plans? They were meant to be placed in towns, homes, quiet lives. To grow without knowing, until the time came. And what time is that? I don't know, but they feared her. Enough to try. And burn the place down to stop it. Elias leaned in. So Briar was meant for something. A spark, maybe a reckoning. But they underestimated one thing. What? Love. When Elias returned to Hollow Bluff, he brought nothing back but silence. He told Briar he'd found ruins. Talked to an old nun. Learned that the past was better left in the past. She studied him. But it's not, is it? No, then teach me, so I'm not afraid of it. They started meeting each morning in the barn, not for chores, for training, reading maps, following trails, marksmanship with pebbles, Morse code with lanterns. Why are we doing this? She asked. Because I don't know what you are yet. But I know the world will come asking. And I want you to have answers. Spring came slow that year. The hills greened early, but the sky stayed gray. Letters stopped arriving, but writers didn't. Strangers passed through town watching. Not talking. Emma said they asked about Elias, about Briar. Elias started sleeping with a rifle near the door again. Grady didn't ask. Just oiled his own. One night Briar said, "You think I was born special or made?" Elias crouched by her bed. Maybe. Both, but special don't mean different. It just means you carry something extra, and I'm here to help you carry it. She nodded. Then whispered, "I had a dream last night. Jesse was in it. He said to be brave, that you needed me to be." Elias blinked. "You believe it? I believe you both." The next morning, a rider waited at the ranch gate, black coat, military stance. He held up a letter sealed in wax. Elias took it. "Read." It. Then folded it and placed it in his coat. "What does it say?" Grady asked. "That she's not the only one. And others are being hunted. You going to go?" Elias looked at Briar, then the apple tree. Then the hills. "No, they'll come here. And we'll be ready." The first storm of spring didn't come with rain. It came with riders, 3 of them. Military posture, civilian clothes. Clean boots, cold eyes. They arrived just past sunrise and didn't stop at the sheriff's office or saloon. They came straight to Elias Carver's ranch. Briar spotted them first. "Company," she called from the porch. Elias stepped out, rifle across his shoulder. "You lost." The tallest man spoke, sharp jaw. "No warmth. We're looking for a girl." Elias didn't blink. "You found one, but she's mine. Her name is Briar." "That name doesn't belong to you." The second man stepped forward. "She's part of a program. We have jurisdiction." Grady appeared behind them, shotgun resting lazy in his hands. "You don't have dirt on your boots. You don't have welcome on your lips. And you sure as hell don't have jurisdiction." The third man, silent until now, pulled out a document, signed orders. She's to be retrieved and relocated for her own safety. Elias took it. "Read it." Then tore it in half. "That's how much paper means to me." The tall man stepped closer. "You really want to make this hard?" "Son," Elias said, voice low, "I want you to try, so I can end this my way." They left, but it wasn't over. That night, fire danced on the northern horizon. The schoolhouse. Emma tried to put it out with a bucket line. So did half the town. But by dawn, the place where children had learned their letters was a husk of scorched boards and collapsed dreams. Briar stood in the ashes the next morning. She didn't cry. She knelt. Dug through the rubble and pulled out her journal, scorched, wet, but intact. She wiped it clean and stood. "They want to burn everything that teaches us we matter." Elias stepped beside her. "Then we build it again." Sheriff Mayfield called a meeting at the church. Elias stood at the pulpit. This wasn't just arson. It was a message, a threat. And the only way they win is if we stop standing. Someone called out, "They've got the government behind them." Elias, shook his head. They've got cowards behind badges. That ain't the same thing. Emma raised a hand. So what do? We teach anyway. We protect anyway. We live anyway. And if they come again, we show them what it means to come after Hollow Bluff. That night, Briar sat with her journal by candlelight. She wrote, "They tried to erase me, but roots don't burn. They grow deeper." 2 days later, the writers returned. They didn't come to talk. They came with wagons, uniformed men. Orders, guns. They lined the town square. Declared martial law. Marianne stood in front of them. On whose authority? A woman in uniform stepped forward. Federal agency oversight. Regional directive. You realize you're threatening civilians? Children? The woman didn't flinch. This isn't personal. It's protocol. Elias stepped forward. Badge on his chest. Then your protocol's about to have a real bad day. The standoff lasted hours. Until dusk. Then a figure rode in from the west. Black horse. Black coat. Silver badge. Marshal Tessa Quinlan. A legend. She dismounted. Read the situation. Then held up a document. This town's under federal protection. Effective immediately. All other orders rescinded. You answer to me now. The soldiers hesitated. The woman who'd led them folded. I want this in writing. You got it. Right here. Quinlan tapped her badge. I outrank you. Move. Later, Elias sat with Quinlan on the church steps. Didn't expect you to come. Didn't expect to be needed. But someone up high believes in the girl. Enough to back her. Quietly. You believe? Quinlan looked out at the stars. I believe in what she makes the rest of you become. That kind of gravity doesn't come often. Elias watched Briar run with the other kids in the square. She's just a kid. No, she's a lighthouse. And lighthouses don't run from storms. They stay. The next day, Hollow Bluff started rebuilding the schoolhouse. Everyone pitched in. Grady cut beams. Emma measured windows. Even Doc Hanley hauled stone. And Briar? She painted a sign. What should it say? Elias asked. She smiled. Truth doesn't burn. And beneath it, in smaller letters, built by those who stayed, Elias looked out over the hills that night. Trouble hadn't gone. It never did. But Hollow Bluff had chosen its line. And this time, they weren't backing down. They called the spring that followed the rebuilding season. By the time the first daffodils broke through the thawed earth, Hollow Bluff wasn't just standing again, it was taller. The schoolhouse rose from its ashes in half the time folks thought it would. Stronger, wider, with thick beamed walls and double-paned windows to guard against both weather and fire. The sign Briar painted hung proudly above the door. Truth doesn't burn. And every time a child passed under it, they read it aloud, out loud, together. Like a promise. Marshal Quinlan stayed 3 weeks, long enough to oversee the withdrawal of the outside troops, long enough to plant seeds of her own. She spent time with Briar, taught her how to spot a tail, how to send silent signals, how to read body language like scripture. You think she's going to fight? Elias asked one night. Quinlan sat by the fire, cleaning her sidearm. No, I think she already is, just in a different way. Elias nodded. She's never going to have a normal life, is she? What's normal? Being kept small so you don't scare the world? Or living wide even if it means lighting up the dark? He sipped his coffee. Then I'll teach her to burn bright. They never saw the shadow coming. Not until the train stopped at Hollow Bluff, unannounced. An unmarked car. No passengers. Just a single crate. And a note to the girl who can still change everything. Inside the crate, books, journals, files, all bearing the same sealess stylized eye inside a triangle. Grady muttered, "That ain't friendly." Elias examined the contents. Military science, early childhood development, DNA structure. Pages highlighted. Notes in red ink. One page stood out. Subject 3B, relocated. Result: wild-type adaptation stronger than anticipated. Observations ceased. Potential breach. Elias folded the page, tucked it in his coat. They want us to know they're still watching. Briar didn't flinch. She read every word, asked every question. Am I a weapon? No, Elias said. You're a mirror. You show people what they are, even if they don't like it. Especially then. Quinlan sent word to her contacts. The documents were real, classified, leaked. Somebody high up wants her protected. Somebody higher wants her erased. And which side wins? Elias asked. Quinlan stared toward the apple tree. The one she chooses. More riders came, not soldiers, pilgrims, quiet people, with tired eyes, and children with old pain in their faces. They came one by one, then in threes, then in wagons. Elias met them at the ridge. You looking for a fight? One woman shook her head. Looking for somewhere that doesn't flinch when we speak our truth. Elias tipped his hat. Then welcome home. Hollow Bluff became more than a town. It became a haven. A whisper passed from mouth to mouth across states and valleys. There's a girl in a ranch town who carries fire in her bones and kindness in her hands. Follow the apple trees. Find the place where truth doesn't burn. Grady built cabins. Doc Hanley trained medics. Emma opened a second classroom. And Briar? She taught the youngest how to plant roots. One night, Elias and Grady stood on the porch. The sky above was clear. Elias held a letter. Another one. Marked urgent. He didn't open it, just stared at the seal. Still think they'll come for her again? Grady asked. Not think. No. Then what do we do? Elias looked out over the glowing windows of the cabins below. Same thing we did last time, and the time before. We stand. Briar sat on the edge of her bed that night, staring out the window. If they come for me, she whispered, will you run with me? Elias crouched beside her. No, baby girl, I won't run. I'll ride. Out ahead. So when they get close, they'll see the man who already decided what he'd die for. She nodded. Then I won't hide. I'll stand too. And somewhere deep in the trees outside Hollow Bluff, a figure watched, binoculars in gloved hands. Radio. Crackling faint. Subject stable. Unaware of full capacity. Environment secure. Further instructions? A pause, then a voice. Observe, but do not interfere. Not yet. The summer sun hung heavy over Hollow Bluff. Children ran barefoot across the field where the school once burned, now green and blooming. Farmers traded eggs for medicine, and evenings echoed with laughter from the porches. Peace had shape again. It breathed through windows and settled in the bones. But Elias Carver didn't sleep easy, because the horizon wasn't still. He noticed it first when the birds stopped flying low. Then fences were cut. Once, then twice. No prints, no sign of theft, just intent. Grady found a silver nail in a fence post, embedded too deep for any hammer. Signal, he muttered. Somebody's telling somebody something. Elias nodded. And they ain't whispering. Briar had grown. She stood taller now, sharper, quieter when she needed to be. She read late, wrote more, learned fast, and when Elias taught her how to shoot, she hit the tin on the third try. I don't want to hurt nobody, she said. Then hit so you don't have to twice. One morning, a boy arrived at the town gate, dusty, starving, alone. He carried a note pinned to his chest. Heard of the girl with fire in her blood. Let me stay. Emma took him in, bathed him, fed him. He didn't speak for 2 days. Then Briar sat beside him under the apple tree. Didn't say a word, just waited. And the boy whispered. They burned everything. Within a week, 3 more children arrived, each carrying pain like a backpack they'd never learn how to set down. Marianne tracked the burn paths. All led back to institutions, group homes, research programs. Someone's cleaning house, she said. Elias folded the reports. No, Someone's hunting their mistakes. One night, Briar came to Elias with a question. What if I wasn't supposed to? Survive? He looked at her, not as a girl, not even as his daughter, as something larger. Then fate lost. And we won. The dream started again. Briar woke gasping, eyes wide, heart pounding. Voices, she whispered, but not mine. Not even real ones. Elias sat by her bedside each time, held her hand until her breathing slowed. Grady tried explaining it. Her mind's reaching, stretching past where it should. Like a river pushing against its banks. Doc Hanley offered another thought. What if it's not just her mind? What if she's tuning into something they buried in her? Emma frowned. Then we need to help her name it. Because nameless things don't stay quiet. They built a room in the barn. A study, books, journals, symbols, maps. Briar called it the lantern room. Because dark things hate the light, she said. Every afternoon. She went there. Read, drew, connected things. One day, she drew a tree with fire for roots. It doesn't grow up, she said. It grows down, deeper than they can reach. Elias received another letter. No stamp. No sender, just 6 words. They are coming. Not soldiers, wolves. He showed it to Quinlan. She didn't hesitate. We need to call the others. There are others? She nodded. Not many, but enough. The ones who never sold their spines for silver. Elias smiled grimly. Then I hope they ride fast. The next morning, smoke curled on the far hills. Not wildfires, controlled burns, strategic, measured. A net closing. Quinlan loaded her rifle. They're pushing animals this way. Testing what will protect. Elias pulled on his coat. Then let's give them their answer. Briar gathered the younger children, taught them how to find each other in the dark, made a chain of hands. We move like roots, she told them. No one alone. The night before the expected assault, Hollow Bluff stood quiet, not fearful. Ready. Elias walked the perimeter. Grady stood at the barn with lanterns lit. Emma prayed under her breath by the schoolhouse steps. And Briar? She climbed the apple tree, watched the stars, and whispered to the wind. You tried to end me before I began. But I grew. Anyway, and now I carry every spark you feared. Come find out what they become. The wolves came at midnight. Not with howls. With radios. With signal jammers, blackout gear, and eyes used to watching people break. But Hollow Bluff wasn't made of what broke easy. And the girl they wanted wasn't asleep. They hit the outer perimeter first, crept through the tree line, found decoys, empty clothes strung between fence posts. Then came the flares, lit up the night like sunrise. Grady opened fire from the west. Barn, Quinlan took the east. Elias waited by the chapel. Steps. Briar was gone, exactly where she needed to be. Underground. The lantern room had a trapdoor, built over weeks. A tunnel carved to the creek. Inside. Briar knelt beside 4 other children. Close your eyes, she whispered. Why? The smallest asked. Because fear lives in the eyes. And we don't have space for it right now. Above, the firefight turned. The wolves weren't used to resistance. Moved like shadows, clean, efficient. But Elias fought like a man who'd made peace with death. And Quinlan fought like she owed it nothing. One by one, townsfolk joined. Doc Hanley with his ancient revolver, Emma with a slingshot and a torch. Even Sheriff Mayfield returned, rifle slung and jaw clenched. Heard you had a problem, he said. Elias nodded. Just the kind I like. The wolves tried to flank. But found trenches. TRIPWIREs. One very angry goat, Daisy headbutted a man so hard his radio broke. Grady cheered. Told you she had purpose. Inside the tunnel, Briar breathed slow. She felt the ground above like a drum. Each footstep, each explosion, a story in the soil. They're retreating, she whispered. How do you know? One boy asked. She smiled. Because the roots are shaking them. An hour later, silence fell, but it wasn't over. Elias walked the field, 6 downed. Attackers. 1 wounded. Handcuffed. Left at the chapel door with a note. Wrong town. Wrong girl. Come again, and we won't leave one breathing. By sunrise, Hollow Bluff was lit with lanterns. Not for fear, for mourning. 1 of the cabins had burned. The family inside got out, but the history didn't. Briar stood in front of the ashes. They think fire is the end, but it's just the part that makes the roots stronger. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. You're not wrong. They rebuilt again. Faster this time. Stronger. Quinlan left the next week. She hugged Elias like an equal. Hugged Briar like a legacy. The tide's not done rising, she said. But now the lighthouse is built. In the weeks that followed, no more. Strangers came, not in force, but Elias could feel the watching. A different kind of silence. The kind before something worse. He doubled the watches. Briar trained harder. Grady mapped escape routes. Emma wrote lessons in code. They weren't surviving anymore. They were preparing. One day, Marianne arrived with a new lead. I found someone who used to work in the program. Alive? In hiding. Deep. But scared enough to talk. Where? Arizona. Near the Red Cliffs. Elias packed that night. Briar didn't protest. She handed him her journal. In case you need to remember what we're fighting for. The ride was long. Hot. Lonely. The contact was a woman. Mid-40s, eyes like flint. Name's Raina, she said. And I owe that girl everything. Why? Because I was supposed to be her handler. But she never let them break her. Even as a baby. She stared like she knew your lies before you said them. What do they want from her? Proof that nature wins. That something can survive everything. They're scared of that. Because it means they're not the only ones who control the future. Will they stop? Raina shook her head. No, but maybe they'll bleed first. Elias returned to Hollow Bluff with a name, Project Wildfire, and a target. A facility hidden in the canyon, still operational. Still searching, still taking children. Briar met his eyes. Then we don't wait anymore. The map was crude, sketched on the back of a ration ledger. Hand-drawn lines, ink faded, but the mark was clear. A red X in the cliffs. He laid it flat on the kitchen table. Grady, Emma, Marianne, and Briar circled around. It's not a rescue mission, he said. It's a shutdown. Briar stared at the X. How many are there? Could be 5. Could be 50. Doesn't matter. If they're still taking kids, they don't get to walk away. Marianne pulled strings. Quinlan returned with a small team. Silent types. Federal ghosts. Retired, but not idle. They met under moonlight. Planned with whiskey and whispers. Briar stayed quiet. Absorbing everything. Elias kept watching her. She wasn't the same girl who'd arrived on his porch years ago. She wasn't even the same girl who'd defied death under the apple tree. She was something else now, something the world should have feared. From the start, they rode out at dawn, left Hollow Bluff behind in the care of Sheriff Mayfield and the townsfolk. Grady drove the wagon. Elias and Quinlan flanked it. Briar rode up front, eyes locked on the horizon. You sure you want to do this? Elias asked. She nodded. They're still hurting people. I was lucky, others weren't. The Red Cliffs rose 3 days later, massive, bleeding rust. And buried within them, the place Raina had named. They call it the Garden. But it held no flowers. Just corridors, labs holding rooms. Compound carved from stone and secrets. They scouted first. Infrared lenses. Silent drones. Found 15 guards. 2 researchers. 1 overseer. And 7 children, held underground. We do this clean, Quinlan said. Fast, sharp, loud at the end, never the start. Elias checked his rifle. Then let's start planting seeds. Nightfall. The first breach came from the southern tunnel. Grady and a sniper from Quinlan's crew neutralized the watchtower. Quinlan's team took the perimeter. Elias and Briar went under, straight into the garden. The hall smelled sterile, electric. Briar moved like she belonged there. Every turn, she predicted. Every door, she prepped. You okay? Elias whispered. I think this place remembers me, even if I don't remember it. They reached the holding room. 7 children. Blank eyes. No chains. Just silence. Briar knelt. You're safe now. The light made it here. Gunfire erupted above. The overseer found them. Tall, cold, voice like broken glass. I warned them you'd come. Elias raised his rifle. And here we are. The man held up a detonator. You take them, I end this place. With them in it. Briar stepped forward. Then end it. But know this. They won't burn alone. You will. The man hesitated. She kept walking. I was your experiment. Your mistake. And now I'm your reckoning. Her hand reached his and crushed it. Bones snapped. The detonator fell. Elias caught it. Grady tackled the man. Sirens blared. Walls shook, but the exit was clear. They led the children out. Quinlan cleared the road. Explosives were set, and at sunrise, the garden fell. Rocks tumbled. Flames reached high. And the red cliffs swallowed the last of Project Wildfire. That night, the children sat by a campfire. They didn't speak, but they didn't tremble. Briar sat with them. Held their hands, told them about goats and apple trees and crooked birdhouses. And when one of them smiled, Elias felt the weight in his chest loosen. They returned to Hollow Bluff with scars, but no regrets. The town welcomed them like kin. Quinlan's team dispersed, but left tools, weapons, maps. Preparedness wasn't paranoia. Not anymore. Briar reopened the school. Taught 2 classes now. 1 for letters. 1 for legacy. The sign above still read, Truth doesn't burn. But now, below it, a new plaque, Truth also fights. And it wins. Summer faded, not in color, but in sound. The laughter still echoed, but deeper now, mellowed. Like the town had exhaled after holding its breath for years. Hollow Bluff had survived the fire. The wolves. The weight of secrets clawing out from them. The past. But peace never came easy, and it never came permanent. Briar turned 13. They held a celebration at the schoolhouse. Pies and fiddles and lanterns strung between the apple trees. She stood taller now, shoulders squared, eyes older than her age. Emma read a poem. Grady gave her a knife. Hanley gave her a worn compass. Elias didn't give her a speech. He gave her his father's watch. Time doesn't tell us who we are, he said, but it tells us how long we have to become it. That night, after the candles burned down and the last chair folded, Briar sat alone beneath the apple tree. Elias joined her. You thinking? Always. What about? What comes next? He didn't answer, because he didn't know. The next morning, Grady found a mark carved into the north gate. 3 lines, 2 horizontal, 1 vertical. Tracker code, Quinlan confirmed when she returned. Old language, meant to be read by the few. What's it mean? Elias asked. She looked grim. It means, keep moving. They see you. Quinlan had brought news. Other towns. Other fires. Places like Hollow Bluff. Trying to stand, being struck down one by one. They think if they can scatter the embers, the fire won't rise again. Briar shook her head. They forgot what happens when roots catch flame. The decision came easy, hard to say. Easy to make. They would protect Hollow Bluff, but they would also build more like it. Seeds, scattered wide, refuges, sanctuaries, small towns, with tall backbones, and Briar would lead them, not now. But soon, Elias trained the older kids. Quinlan taught the mothers. Emma organized a code network using books and trading post routes. Summer faded. Not in color, but in sound. The laughter still echoed, but deeper now, mellowed. Like the town had exhaled after holding its breath for years. Hollow Bluff had survived the fire. The wolves. The weight of secrets clawing out from them. Past, but peace never came easy, and it never came permanent. Briar turned 13. They held a celebration at the schoolhouse. Pies and fiddles and lanterns strung between the apple trees. She stood taller now, shoulders squared, eyes older than her age. Emma read a poem. Grady gave her a knife dock. Hanley gave her a worn compass. Elias didn't give her a speech. He gave her his father's watch. Time doesn't tell us who we are, he said, but it tells us how long we have to become it. That night, after the candles burned down and the last chair folded, Briar sat alone beneath the apple tree. Elias joined her. You. Thinking? Always. What about? What comes next? He didn't answer, because he didn't know. The next morning, Grady found a mark carved into the north gate. 3 lines, 2 horizontal, 1 vertical. Tracker code, Quinlan confirmed when she returned. Old language, meant to be read by the few. What's it mean? Elias asked. She looked grim. It means, keep moving. They see you. Quinlan had brought news. Other towns. Other fires. Places like Hollow Bluff. Trying to stand, being struck down one by one. They think if they can scatter the embers, the fire won't rise again. Briar shook her head. They forgot what happens when roots catch flame. The decision came easy, hard to say. Easy to make, they would protect Hollow Bluff, but they would also build more like it. Seeds, scattered wide, refuges, sanctuaries, small towns. With tall backbones, and Briar would lead them, not now. But soon, Elias trained the older kids. Quinlan taught the mothers. Emma organized a code network using books and trading post routes. Grady retrofitted wagons into mobile bunkers. If they're gonna chase us, he said, they'll earn every mile. 1 morning, a rider came, blood on his shirt. Winter returned like a memory hollow. Bluff had almost forgotten. The wind didn't howl. It whispered. Cold seeped through cracks, not just in the walls, but in the spirit. The fight had taken its toll, but so had the victories. And sometimes, peace makes folks softer. They couldn't afford that. Briar patrolled now every morning. Every dusk, she walked the perimeter with Daisy trailing behind. Lantern in one hand, journal in the other. She wrote what she saw, not just tracks or weather, but how the town felt. Today, the sky felt nervous. The wind asked questions no one wanted to answer. Elias watched her grow more than he guided her now. She moved with purpose, listened deeper. One night, she woke with a start. I saw them, before they came, in my dream. I saw the symbols. The gate, the numbers. Elias handed her a pen. Draw it. She did. 4 pages. Each detail exact. Quinlan stared at it the next morning. She's not guessing. She's remembering what hasn't happened yet. The marks returned, on fence posts, under windowsills, hidden in carvings. But these weren't tracker warnings, they were countdowns. 3 left, 1 more dawn. Next time we don't knock. Grady erased one with the butt of his knife. Cowards right in the dark. A stranger arrived, gray coat, pale eyes. No horse. He walked into the square, past the chapel, up to the schoolhouse. Briar stepped outside to meet him. You the fire girl? She didn't answer. He nodded. Thought so. They're scared of you, you know. Then why come? Because they sent me to talk, but I came to warn. Elias stepped out behind her. Name? Colt. Used to be part of it. Project Wildfire. But I left. Too late, maybe, but I left. What do they want now? Colt glanced around. To finish what they started. Not just her, not just the kids. All of it. Anything that remembers. Briar narrowed her eyes. Then they're not coming for me. They're coming for the truth. Colt stayed one night. Left at dawn, didn't take food. Didn't say goodbye. Left a map scratched on the back of an apple crate. Coordinates. Last known base. Not active, but not dead either. Quinlan studied it. This isn't a fight we planned, but it's the one we finish. Emma called it the last winter. Because spring wouldn't come unless they ended this. The children were moved. Safely. Quietly, in covered wagons. Through mountain passes, Briar stayed. I won't be a symbol from a distance. I stand where the roots were planted. Elias didn't argue. He just stood beside her. The days grew shorter. Lights dimmed at night. They buried food. Stored ammunition. Trained in shifts. And Briar taught the rest. Not how to fight. How to remember. Every time they erase, we write. Every time they burn, we plant. Every time they strike, we stand. She carved those words into the chapel door. The same door she was once tied to. Grady watched her do it. Eyes damp. They picked the wrong girl. That night, it snowed. Thick. Heavy. Quiet. Blanketed the hills in white. But beneath the stillness, everyone knew the storm wasn't over. It was coming home. The sky broke open on the first day of March. Not with rain. With thunder. Rolling. Unnatural. Like the sound of old debts being called in. And from the east they came. Not in silence. Not in peace. Black clad. Armored. Dozens. Maybe more. No banners. Just efficiency. Just purpose. The last echo of Project Wildfire. Elias stood on the chapel steps. Same as before. Older now. Slower. But more certain. Grady. Beside him. Quinlan flanked the ridge. Briar didn't wait. She rode out to meet them. Alone. She wore no armor. Just her red scarf. And the watch. She carried a book in one hand. And a stick of chalk in the other. They halted at the tree line. Engines. Humming. One stepped forward. Masked. Rifle slung but not aimed. You are Subject 3B. My name is Briar. You will come with us. No. You are property of. I belong to no one. And neither do they. She drew a line in the dirt. Cross that, and it won't be mercy that meets you. The standoff didn't last long. They crossed, and the roots answered. Hidden trenches. Fire lines. Signal flares. Hollow Bluff didn't fight like soldiers. They fought like family. Every home became a bunker. Every voice became a battle. Cry. Children sang from the safe tunnels, louder with each explosion. Briar held the front. She moved like wind. Like fury. Like every ancestor standing behind her. Elias took a bullet to the shoulder. Kept moving. Grady ran out of ammunition and started throwing bricks. Emma pulled wounded back behind the schoolhouse and used a kitchen knife when they got too close. And through it all, the attackers faltered. Because this wasn't just resistance. It was memory made flesh. By sundown, only 10 remained. They retreated. Left their dead. Left their gear. Briar watched them go from the same ridge Jesse once rode. Tell them what you saw, she called. Tell them we didn't burn. We never burn. Doc Hanley patched wounds until dawn. They lost 2 cabins. No lives. The roots held. A week. Later, Briar stood beneath the apple tree. The blossoms had returned. She placed the old chalk stick into the soil. Everything planted in truth grows back. Elias stood beside her, arm in a sling. You led them. She nodded. It's time. The town voted. Unanimous. Briar Carver, age 13, was now the official voice of Hollow Bluff. Not a mayor. Not a sheriff. Just keeper of memory. Of fire. Of peace bought and paid in scars. Letters were sent. Other towns replied. Langlo rebuilt. Others formed. All tied together not by politics or law. But by story. The story of a girl once tied to a chapel door. And the people who untied her. One day years later, a child asked Briar, "Did they ever stop coming?" She smiled. "No, but neither did we." The tree grew tall. The fire burned clean. And the truth? It stood. Always. Because Hollow Bluff didn't raise victims, it raised roots. It raised legacy. It raised a girl who became the storm. And storms don't bow, they build. In the haze of late spring, the air in Hollow Bluff carried the scent of fresh plow and burgeoning hope. Days stretched longer, the sun gilding every crest with promise. But beneath the surface of renewal, the memory of conflict still pulsed, an ember waiting for wind. Elias Carver walked the new horizon line. The earth was tilled now, crops sprouting between neat rows. He paused at the edge where the older land met the newly settled plots, where families now built fences, planted gardens, raised animals. His eyes traced the fences like a sentry, ensuring lines remained intact, a silent vow that no one would breach this peace again. Beside him, Briar, keeper of Hollow Bluff, walked with purpose. She carried a satchel filled with letters and proclamations from other fledgling communities that had sprung up under the symbol of the chapel door. Each letter shared triumphs and struggles, the forging of schools, the defense against each new storm, or the arrival of wanderers seeking sanctuary. "We're not alone anymore," she said, releasing a seed into the freshly tilled soil. "Each of these towns carries our motto, Elias. Truth doesn't burn, but it grows wherever people stand for it." He nodded, dusting dirt from his hands. "And you've planted that seed well." Word arrived midday at the Silver Star Saloon. A courier, dust-splattered and breathless, with news from the north. The mountain passes had opened, heralding trade routes reborn. Alongside wagons of goods, refugees arrived, families escaping drought and conflict in distant valleys. Drawn by rumors of Hollow Bluff's resilience, council convened at dusk in the chapel. Lanterns illuminated the faces of leaders and laborers alike. Bishop Crane offered the invocation, his voice resonant. "We gather not as strangers, but as kin born of hardship and triumph." Then Briar rose, the youngest in attendance but speaking with the authority of a veteran. "These families have walked through fire and drought to stand here. It is our duty to offer them rest, not suspicion, to offer them home, not exile. Let the walls of Hollow Bluff open with arms, not guns." Mary Ann, representing the compassionate arms of State Council, stood to second the motion. Legally, they qualify for refuge. But more than statutes, this town believes in sanctuary. We welcome them. Applause swept through the chapel, echoing against the ancient beams. For the first time, the congregation included voices not just from local fields, but distant tragedies, blending into a chorus of unity. That night, under a canopy of stars, the new arrivals gathered in the town square. Each family received tools, seeds, and a map to the communal gardens. Grady Beaumont led the distribution, his booming laughter bridging languages and customs. Briar watched, learning to guide not just defense, but compassion. She knelt beside a young woman named Marisol, showing her how to read the map, where the earthen storehouses stood, and how to keep the lanterns safe in winter. "This is your home now," Briar whispered. "Keep this ledger alive and your roots will grow deep." Marisol's eyes glistened. "Thank you, Keeper." A title that once seemed so heavy now carried light, an anchor for hope. In the days that followed, the schoolhouse rang with new languages. Lessons in reading and arithmetic mixed with stories from distant lands. Emma Kingsley adapted the curriculum, weaving history of Hollow Bluff alongside cultural traditions of the newcomers, folk songs and harvest rites, prayers and meditations. The children learned composting one day, and the next, the art of crafting protective symbols from their homelands. Doc Hanley and his team expanded the infirmary. Patients brought tales of past wounds, shrapnel from wars, scars from burn scars. The ache of starvation, yet found healing in the tranquility of the valley. Hanley called it the medicine of peace, prescribing work in the gardens and fellowship in the evenings as part of his therapy. But life never stays absent of friction. A dispute arose over grazing rights. A family from the far north had unknowingly let their sheep stray into an established garden. Crops were trampled, anger sparked. Council convened again. Elias presided, calm but firm. He listened to each side. The sheep herders, fearful of losing their livelihood. The gardeners, protecting the seeds that fed them. After hours of deliberation, they reached a compromise, rotating pastures bordered by living hedges, planted by both parties together. Through this, Breyer saw the lesson. Peace is not absence of conflict, but the practice of resolution. Spring rolled into full pallet. The apple tree bloomed again, heavier with blossoms than any year before. Beneath it, Elias and Breyer sat in silence, watching a hummingbird flit between petals. You ever imagine when this all started that we'd be here? Elias asked, voice soft. Breyer's gaze drifted over the valleys. I always believed in what could be, not just what was. But I never imagined how many others would believe with me. He squeezed her hand. You taught us all, even me. She turned solemn. One day, I won't be the keeper anymore. Someone else will. And they'll need this story. He looked at the watch. Around her wrist, the heirloom that marked every turning point, and nodded. Your story will carry on, long after we're gone. The seasons turned, and the people of Hollow Bluff thrived. Letters arrived weekly now, inquiries from lands far and near, requests to join the coalition of peaceful towns. A network blossomed, threads connecting valleys and plateaus under the banner of unity. In the cherry orchard, the first steady shipments of fruit left for distant markets, trading not just goods, but goodwill. The Silver Star Saloon began hosting tailies from the road nights, where travelers shared news and legends, and Hollow Bluff exchanged hospitality for the world's stories. In the heart of the community, a new chapel took root. Built from salvaged stone and timber donated by every settler, its windows bore inscriptions of every culture represented. Celtic knots, Arabic script, indigenous motifs. At the center hung a bell cast by local smiths, rung not only on Sundays, but to signal celebrations and collective calls to action. On dedication day, Breyer, no longer a child in her posture, rang the bell. Its sonorous tone echoed across the fields, carried by ravens and wind alike. As the villagers gathered, she spoke into the hush. This bell reminds us that our bonds ring louder than any threat. We are rooted, we are one, and we stand, always. Elias watched from the back, tears unbidd. Marianne clasped his hand and whispered, You led her to the door. She opened the world. He smiled, a quiet pride that only a father can know. She raised us all. And the bell tolled, marking not just the hour, but the ongoing chronicle of a town that refused to burn, and a girl whose light became a legacy. The year turned slowly, but the change came fast. Summer stretched wide over Hollow Bluff, and with it, word spread beyond the frontier. They had become more than a town, they were a myth in motion, a living tale of survival, defiance, and rebirth. So it was no surprise when the first delegation arrived. 3 riders, clean clothes, polished boots, badges from the Dominion Bureau, a governing body Breyer had only heard about in rumors. They came not with rifles or chains, but with papers, laws, and intentions that smelled too sweet. They were received on the chapel steps, the same place where every trial and triumph had begun. We bring greetings from the Bureau, the lead envoy, said a man named Caldas, his voice smooth as river stones. You've inspired many. We think your success should be modeled, standardized, federated. Breyer didn't flinch. You mean controlled? He offered a thin smile. No, guided, safe, coordinated. Elias leaned beside her. That's not how roots grow, Caldas chuckled. Roots without guidance strangle each other underground. Breyer answered by handing him a jar. Inside, a small apple sapling grew from ash-blackened soil. It grew from what they burned. Without your maps, without your oversight. And it didn't strangle anything. The bureau men stayed 3 days. They asked questions. Measured. Watched. They took notes on the schoolhouse, on how disputes were resolved, how trade was monitored. But at every turn, they found something they couldn't quantify. Trust. Built in. Fire. Forged by community. On the final evening, Caldas made his pitch. A federal charter. Guaranteed trade routes. Protection. Licensing for the educators and healers. Your story can be part of the national record. You can lead from within. Breyer shook her head. We already are leading, without permission, without debt. They left before dawn, left behind gifts, books, coin, and a single pamphlet. The New Dominion, A Path to Order. Emma burned it in the orchard. Marianne said nothing, but her eyes lingered long on the smoke. The people of Hollow Bluff knew it wasn't the last they'd see of the Bureau, and this time, the battle wouldn't be fought with fire or rifles. It would be fought with stories. With rights. With memory. Breyer began writing a book. Not a journal, a record. Not just of what happened, but how they lived. How they recovered. How they governed. Each chapter bore the name of someone who stood when it counted. Elias, Jesse, Marianne, Grady, Daisy. Even the chapel door had a chapter. Because we never forget what we outgrew, she said. Trade flourished. The orchard expanded. More towns sent scouts to learn, not conquer, and Hollow Bluff taught freely, but never surrendered its independence. They created a new kind of bond, not of empire. But of soil. Of common cause. Of shared scars. Late one night, Elias walked the ridge. His bones ached more now, but his eyes still caught every movement. Beside the lantern, he found Breyer asleep with her book across her chest. The latest page read. Asterisk. If the fire taught us anything, it's that freedom doesn't come from overthrowing rulers. It comes from outgrowing them. Asterisk. He tucked a blanket over her. Watched the stars settle into the wide, waiting dark. The first frost came early. Not the kind that wilted leaves, but the kind that whispered warnings. It coated fences in silver and left breath hanging like questions in the morning air. The harvest was bountiful, but hearts were wary. Because rumors don't sleep. A letter arrived from downriver, a town Breyer had only seen in maps, sealed in red wax. Anonymous. It read. They're coming again. Not with fire, with forms, with ink, with judges in black coats. And if they can't rule you, they'll erase you. They call it reclassification. Breyer showed it to Elias. He set his coffee down without sipping. Then it begins, the quiet siege. Marianne convened a gathering, representatives from Langlo, Bright Hollow, Three Pines, all towns like Hollow Bluff, all born from defiance. They met in the schoolhouse. The desks moved to the sides, maps nailed to walls, candles burning long past midnight. Reclassification, Marianne explained, isn't about roads or taxes. It's about identity. If they can redefine you, they don't have to destroy you. They simply make you disappear in plain sight. Breyer spoke next. We survived fire, guns, ghosts from underground labs. We didn't fight to be listed under some footnote in a bureaucrat's ledger. If they want to name us, then let us name ourselves. It was unanimous. A new charter would be written. Not asking permission, but declaring presence. They called it the Covenant of the Free Valleys. A declaration, not of rebellion, but of autonomy. It outlined principles, local governance by elected keepers, open trade without hierarchy, community justice instead of distant courts, rights of sanctuary for the displaced, memory as law. Elias drafted the first line. Let no one name what they do not tend. The Bureau responded in silence. For 3 weeks, no word. Then came the auditor, a woman named Sloan. Thin glasses, precise handwriting. She didn't wear a badge, but her boots were too clean. She sat in the Silver Star Saloon and asked too few questions. Emma said, she listens like someone measuring how best to close the door. Briar met her head-on, brought her a copy of the Covenant. Sloane read it, once, then again. "You know," she said softly, "this kind of thinking, it scares people." Briar raised an eyebrow. "Good, maybe it'll make them think twice before trying." To cage something that won't stay caught, the auditor left. Left behind no words. Just silence. But silence is loud to those who know how to listen. The town doubled its vigilance. They taught every child not just the alphabet, but the Covenant. Every home carved its lines into stone, into wood, into memory. Memory doesn't ask for permission, Elias told the youngest class. It just stays. Then came the drone. Silent, above the orchard. Grady spotted it first. Downed it with a slingshot and a rock. They're not asking anymore. They're watching. Briar retrieved the wreckage. Inside was a transmitter, a log of every heat signature from the last 2 weeks. "They're mapping us like a disease," she said. Marianne added. "Then let's show them immunity." A plan took shape. Not escape. Exposure. They would tell the world. Not through diplomats, but through truth. Stories. They printed the Covenant in dozens of languages. Sent it through traders, teachers, travelers. They taught every person who passed through Hollow Bluff how to carry the message forward. Not just words, but the why behind them. Soon, towns they'd never heard of wrote back, sending tokens. Seeds. Songs, banners, recipes, rituals. 1,000 forms of belonging, and through them, Hollow Bluff became not just a place, but an idea. On the edge of the orchard, Briar etched a new plaque. "The fire tried to silence us. Now every echo is ours." Elias stood beside her. "They still might come." She looked out at the valley. "Then they'll meet more than a town. They'll meet 1,000 voices." Snow came late that year. A warning dressed in white. It dusted the rooftops, coated the orchard trees, and softened the roads. But it didn't hide the tension pulsing through Hollow Bluff, because winter didn't just bring silence anymore. It brought watchers. They came without uniforms, plain clothes, clean boots, blank faces, out-of-place politeness. Always in pairs, asking questions they already knew the answers to. "How long have you lived here? Do you teach children? Does the keeper sign off on your construction?" Briar answered every one with calm precision. "We live here by choice. We teach children because no one else will. And our construction signs off on itself when it doesn't fall down." The visitors never lingered long, but they always returned, and each time they stayed longer, watched more. Measured. With eyes like scales, Quinlan returned with word from the mountain corridors. Whole valleys were being incorporated. Not with armies. With deeds, with licenses, with paper armies dressed in legality. "You don't need to destroy a people to conquer them," she said. "You just need to convince them they belong on a different map." Briar called a gathering, not just leaders. Everyone. They met in the orchard under torches and snowfall. She stood on the root of the oldest tree. "We won't run. We won't fight in shadows. If they want our silence, they'll have to face our sound." She held up the Covenant. Then tore a page from her own journal. "We begin a new book tonight. Not about war, about what comes after. About who we are without needing someone to stand against." Each family added a line, a memory, a recipe, a word their grandmother taught them. The children drew. Grady sketched a map with no borders. Emma penned a poem in 6 languages. Marianne contributed a lullaby from her mother's side of the river. Elias drew a circle. "That's the door," he said, "and it's open, always." By spring, that book had traveled farther than the Bureau's reach. Traders carried it across territories. Pilgrims copied its pages by hand. Artists made murals. A traveling song was born. Passed from campfires to churches. Asterisk, asterisk. The town that stood on roots and flame withstood the steel, outlived the name. Asterisk, 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 asterisk. The door swung wide. The fire stayed clean, and truth was planted evergreen. Asterisk. Then came the final envoy. Not auditors. Single old woman. No badge. No horse. Just a walking stick and a satchel of ledgers. She knocked on the chapel door. I'm not here to change you, she told Briar. I'm here to ask how you did it. Briar invited her in. They talked for hours. When she left, she said, "You don't need federal recognition. You already have a people's record." That night, Briar walked alone to the edge of the orchard. The stars were thick, the air still. She looked up. "We're not the fire anymore," she whispered. "We're the light that comes after." And she knew, with unshakable certainty, the story would never end, because the roots ran too deep, and the door was never closed. Summer thunder rolled in over Hollow Bluff, not with menace, but with memory. It echoed off the valley walls like a hymn too old to forget. The town didn't flinch. Because storms no longer meant destruction. They meant growth. In the heart of town, the Keeper's Hall was being built. Stone by stone, timber by timber. Not a palace, not a fortress, a record house. Briar called it the House of Echoes. Its walls would hold journals, drawings, oral transcripts, seeds, soil samples. Everything they were. Everything they refused to let vanish. Marianne directed its structure. Grady carved the doors. Emma organized the written archives. Elias built the beams with hands that shook now, but still remembered every nail driven in truth. People arrived daily, some to settle, some just to see. A woman from the east brought her daughter. She touched the chapel door, wept, and whispered, "I thought there were no places like this left." Briar placed a hand on her shoulder. "It didn't survive. We built it, and we keep building." A journalist came from beyond the Dominion. He asked permission to stay, observe, record. Briar agreed, under one rule: you don't write what you see. You write what you feel. His dispatches traveled further than any envoy. In weeks, Hollow Bluff was no longer a rumor. It was a signal, a challenge, a promise. Sloan returned. No briefcase. No bureau colors, just a satchel of paper and ink. She asked to see the House of Echoes. Briar walked her through it. No guards. No locked doors. "Isn't it dangerous to leave all this so open?" Sloan asked. "It's dangerous not to," Briar replied. "Truth doesn't rot in sunlight. It rots in silence." Sloan stayed a week, then left a sealed letter. Asterisk. To the keepers of the Free Valleys. This record is safe with me. Not as a weapon. As witness. Asterisk. One evening, Elias asked, "What happens when you grow up, Briar? When you pass the title?" She smiled. "Then I'll be like the orchard, still growing, just not alone." The House of Echoes opened its doors with no ceremony. No speeches. Just a quiet walk through by every soul who lived within 10 ridgelines. Each one left something behind. A stone, a note, a tear, a vow. And when the sun hit the stained glass that Grady and the schoolchildren made together, it cast light across the floor in the shape of a single word: Stay-in-D months. Passed. The town expanded its schools. Built wells in distant territories. Helped resettle others who sought land without chains. Briar drafted a second covenant, not just for survival, for growth. It included the right to teach memory, the right to refuse silence, the right to name one's home, the duty to welcome, not watch. Emma said, "It reads like scripture, but it breathes like freedom." No army ever returned. Not in boots. Not in drones. Just a slow, grudging respect, and a whispering from far cities. Maybe they were right. Briar never claimed victory, because this wasn't war. It was becoming. The fire that shaped her hadn't destroyed her. It refined her. She still walked the perimeter, some nights. But now she did it with company. Children. Elders. Newcomers who asked, "Why do we do this?" She'd smile. "So we remember who we are. And so we never forget why." And the wind carried that memory across the hills, across the world. Wherever someone waited for a light to tell them, it was still possible to live without fear, still possible to grow after fire, still possible to build without permission, still possible to keep the door open.